without innovation, business is dying. You get caught up in what we call the commodity game, where it's all about price. You're competing against the guys over in China that knock off Rolex watches, things like that. There's nothing that differentiates you from anybody else. So I kind of wanted to touch on this, and not just innovating for the sake of innovating, but actual real innovation. So I'm going to touch on 6 principles of innovation that I've found to be a key in when we've done product development, when we've studied anything having to do with innovation. The first one is kind of the founding principle of our company. Our founder, Adolf Schoppe, came over from Germany. He actually founded Quickset Locks before he founded us. But his mantra, all the way up until the day he died, was find something that's not working and make it better. And that's how we came out with the fill valve I mentioned before that goes in the toilet tank, that we actually have 75% of the market on, which is unheard of in pretty much any business. So that was something that he looked at and said, this other valve that's in here doesn't work very well. So I need to come up with something that's actually going to make it work more efficiently, use water better. You're not going to have to worry about leaks and things like that. Another one is Amazon, who I mentioned before. Just to show you, it's not necessarily all about product, but also the packaging. I don't know, have you guys ever heard of their frustration-free packaging that they have? It's when you go to cut, so you've probably all had the experience of trying to open up a package and you can't get it open, particularly the plastic ones. Amazon came out with a concept in which they send you a product, it's in like a Ziploc bag or something really easy to open, and they actually saw a pretty good boost in sales out of that. And that's something that differentiated them from going out to Home Depot, going out to Walmart and buying something. Instead you get this, you don't injure yourself while you're opening Christmas gifts. The second principle of it is to always listen to your customers. And when I say always, I actually mean most of the time, which I'll talk about in a second. But the first thing to always ask is, what do you need? You could have the greatest product in the world, something that is so innovative, so cool, so different, but if it doesn't meet the needs of the market, it's never going to work because people just won't buy it. Part of that is knowing who you're selling to, and this is something that we call market segmentation, which basically means just picking out, instead of saying I want to just sell this to the world, you say I want to sell this to people between the ages of 25 and 35 who have a college education and are interested in cars. That's the kind of studies that we'll do a lot of times to figure out who our main target is. You really can't be all things to all people, so you've got to select very carefully. If you don't, what happens is when you send your message out and try to tell people, hey, this is why you should buy this product, your message gets completely lost on everybody. And then the biggest thing I would say, and this is something you guys kind of have experience in now, is research, research, research. It is huge to go out, talk to people, read up on things, stay on top of the latest trends. If you find out that, or if you're making a product that is coming in, a bronze finish, but you find out that bronze is no longer the hot trend, you're dead. So you always want to stay up on things. You always want to maintain kind of what you're, you always want to maintain your edge on the marketplace. And part of that is also, like I said, going out and actually talking to people. Staying within, in our case, in an office and just sort of talking amongst ourselves and trying to figure out what we want, that's great, that gets us started. But if we don't actually go out and talk to people, and we've gone through this more than once, if you don't actually go out and talk to people, find out what the market really is looking for, what's going to happen is you'll come out with a product that nobody wants, and when you put a product like that in Home Depot, they're not really happy about that, and you end up spending a lot of money trying to just sell it off and get rid of it. So very important to research. That's not to say, though, that consumers in particular always know what they want. For example, how many of you are familiar with the Swiffers? Those mops that, yeah. So when they tested Swiffer initially with consumers, people hated it. They were like, why do I need this? I have a mop, I have a vacuum, I don't really need to have this thing. And in most cases, the academics would tell you, walk away from it, don't even launch it, not worth it, you're going to spend a lot of money for a little return. They decided that it was cool enough and innovative enough that people just didn't understand it. Yeah. And so they still put it out in the marketplace, still launched it out there, and now it's pretty much the #1 cleaning product in the country. The other kind of fun example is, you guys see the Seinfeld reruns on TV? Seinfeld was the worst testing show in TV history in terms of the first, when they initially showed it to viewers and asked them what they thought. Like literally, there has not been a single show that, even the ones that have it here, that tested worse than Seinfeld did. People said it didn't make sense, it wasn't about anything, and now it's known as a show about nothing and is the most popular TV show probably almost in history. Yeah. So sometimes people don't always know it, and you can take the risk, but you have to be careful about that. So you should still do the research, and you should still listen to it before that. The third principle is what I call the KISS principle. This is not your after-school activity, but it is keep it simple, stupid. Can I say stupid in a school? I don't know the rules anymore. Okay. So it's, yeah, it wasn't directed at anybody here. But it's basically simplicity is the best for the market. I kind of go back to that whole thing of you can have the greatest product. If you can't explain it to somebody and why they need it, what it does, etc., you're in trouble. And there's something that we refer to as the 7-second rule, which is particularly true in retail. Try this the next time you're walking down an aisle in a grocery store, department store, whatever, and kind of get an idea of how long it takes you to look at a product and actually go up to take a closer look at it. In most cases, it's within 7 seconds. If you look at a product, there's 7 seconds in which you decide, am I going to look at this further, or am I just going to keep walking away? And so that's kind of always been what we've said, that you have to make the packaging or the product interesting enough and simple enough for people to understand that in that 7 seconds they decide, hey, this is something I'm interested in. One of the best examples of this is Apple. How many of you have iPhones? Okay, yeah, that's about right. So one of the things that Apple did differently when they came out with it, if you have seen Microsoft's packaging and the way that they did software, Microsoft put everything and anything that they possibly could on that packaging. In fact, there's a great video on YouTube that you can look up. Apple, what is it? If Microsoft did Apple packaging, that shows Microsoft's mindset of, we got to put system requirements, we got to put comparisons, we've got to put this, we got to put that on there. Apple's packaging, if you ever look at it, it shows just the product and the name, and that's it. And people thought that that was really cool and innovative, because it's not what software or computer stuff ever was. In contrast, Microsoft, was still out there with the Zune, which you guys probably have never even heard of because it was out on the market for like 2 years, and which my brother swears up and down is a better music player than the iPod ever was. They came out with the Zune that was really complicated. It was very difficult to tell what it was when you were looking at the box of it, and it was very difficult, a little bit more difficult to use. That thing died on the vine, even though it may have been better than what the Apple product was. So there may be a better product out there, but simple and what I call elegant design, like what an iPhone or an iPod is, usually wins out in the marketplace. And the other thing is you get a lot of bonus points with consumers if you make something that seems like it should be really difficult to be really easy. Personal experience on this one, as you may have noticed, Mrs. Waldman is pregnant and is due in a month. So my dad and I actually last weekend put a crib together, and we marveled at just how this thing, I mean, it came in this flat box, came in 1 million pieces, and it was one of the easiest things that we've ever had to assemble. And my dad, who has built multiple pieces of furniture over the years, could not stop talking for like the whole weekend. It actually got really annoying about how easy this thing was to put together. And so he actually now remembers that brand, even though he's probably not going to have to do this again, unless I have to do it again. But it's something that really stuck with him. Now they kind of killed it with the dresser that was not so easy to put together afterwards, and hopefully none of you have to deal with putting cribs together for a little while. So
yeah, little brothers or sisters, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. The fourth principle, fourth is something that John Wooden, greatest basketball coach in college history, said. It's one of his principles on his pyramid of success. Be quick, but don't hurry. What that means is, yes, it is important to be first to market with something. It's important to get your product out there before the competition. It gives you a huge advantage. I mean, there's studies all over the place that tell you that you've got, I forget the exact number, but you're like twice as likely to succeed if your product's out before your competition is. We're going through this right now because we had 2 really bad misses last year in which we let the competition get out ahead of us. So we've actually, in fact, our senior executives are all up in lovely Wisconsin in February. right now visiting a consultant to try to figure out how we can be faster to market. It's that important, even in our industry, which you wouldn't think is necessarily as driven as some of the other ones are. Having said that, there are examples of times when rushing a product out to market actually is a bad thing. So you also need to make sure that when you put the product out that it's done and it's the right product again. One example, for those of you who play video games, the last Assassin's Creed game that came out full of bugs. I mean, like guys walking through walls and people sticking midair, things like that just looked terrible. And it made even like national news that this game came out completely and totally half-baked. A lot of bad press for, I think it was Ubisoft put it out. And it really ended up costing them a major amount of money because they had to bring in extra programmers to fix it. They had to get they had to put out a lot of free downloadable content to keep people happy who had bought the game initially. And it's made a lot of people question on the next game that comes out, which looks really cool, whether or not they're actually going to pre-order it. And pre-orders in the video game industry is huge. So that's one example of how putting out a product before they say not ready for prime time, putting a product out like that can really do some damage. There was another example actually from last night that I saw that I thought I'd share too, that of somebody going about it the right way. I don't know if you guys watch MasterChef Junior, but we happened to flip it on last night in between stuff, and there was this kid there, who was like 11 years old, who was making a dessert, and he went, "This is really too sweet." And he only had like 15 minutes left, but he went, started over, redid the whole thing, and ended up winning the competition. And that's because he actually took the time to test his product out, figure out, is this the right product for my market, which in this case was Gordon Ramsay and the judges, and said, this isn't the right product for it. I need to get rid of this one, start all over again. Yeah, it may not be completely, totally done, but it will be a lot better than the one I was actually going to put out initially. So it was kind of a cool little lesson about sometimes it's best to take a step back and instead of just bowling forward and throwing something out there, to actually just sort of start over, rush it maybe a little bit, but get the right thing out there. The fifth principle is that business and innovation is both an art and a science. And what I mean by that, so the science part is kind of what you see in the room with a lot of statistics, math. I see a lot of charts that look way, way, way too familiar. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into the science portion of it, in which you're trying to figure out forecasts, you're trying to how many products you need to manufacture, you need to figure out when you do your segmentation studies, you need to do an analysis to see what your right consumer is. But then there's the art side of it too, which is kind of the fun side. You guys are all familiar with brands, so like Apple, you guys aren't wearing the branded stuff I'm used to seeing, Nike, Russell Athletic, things along those lines. Those are all brands that people identify with, and actually in a lot of cases, they've built up enough credibility with people that people buy shirts just with the brand on it. Like, you'll see people with just Nike shirts on. Same thing with Apple. Apple has the reputation as being, if you were to describe Apple in one word, innovative's the big one. And that's why people love their products and line up, spend 3 hours in line waiting for it to launch on the day it comes out. So that's part of what being innovative gets you, is that brand power and kind of the cool factor. Same thing with Tesla, the electric cars. There were electric cars before Tesla. Tesla just, I wouldn't say perfected it, but Tesla's made it though where the electric car actually looks like something you'd want to drive, because the previous electric cars looked like little boxes. And Rolex is another big one. I mean, Rolex watches are good, but they're not really any better than like a Citizen in terms of their actual function. But they've built up enough of a brand recognition that people pay obscene amounts of money for Rolex watches. So those are a few brand examples, and that's why brand and style is sometimes as important or even more important than functionality, depending on the market you're in. The last principle here is you cannot be afraid to fail. This is probably the hardest thing. It's the toughest thing for me because I'm extremely competitive. I want to win at everything. As Mrs. Waldman can tell you when we have game nights. So in this case, one of the statistics out there is that out of all the new product ideas that come across, good companies actually only ever put about 30%, about 3 in 10 of the ideas that come through the process actually out into the marketplace. So that means 70% of ideas that people come up with actually never go anywhere. They just die on the vine. And that's actually good, because what it means is that you're brainstorming, you're coming up with ideas, but that you're doing all the stuff above that, such as researching, such as listening to your customers, and also being quick but not hurrying when you're analyzing products. So it's actually a good thing to not just throw something out there because somebody had the idea. I've actually seen it where people get the products cut right before launch because everybody goes, it's not the right thing. Honestly, I wish we did that a little bit more, because that would have saved my bonus last year. But it's definitely something that you need to be aware of when you're out in the business world, that failure, you learn from it, you move on. I always say that you learn a lot more from failure than you do from success. And that's not to say you shouldn't celebrate the success, but sometimes it's better to fail and learn from it, and it just makes it better the next time.
Thank you for watching. Give us a like and tell us in the comments who you would like to see at our sessions. To learn more about the Business Club at Hillcrest High School, visit our website at www.thebusinessclubriverside.org, or follow us on Twitter and Instagram at TBC Riverside. Join us next week for more interesting content. Until next time, keep on learning.